Let's have a look at the discussion tool in Brightspace. Now you might hear this referred to as discussion forums, discussion boards, discussions. It's all talking about the same thing, the tool that we use inside the learning management system to handle student discussions. So the way that students get to the discussion boards is through the communication menu, and then they can go directly to discussions. Staff have access to the subject admin area, which will have underneath communication, we'll find discussions as well. They all go to the same place, which is our discussions page, discussions dashboard, manage discussions. Again, we're all referring to the same thing here, which is the discussions tool. Now, staff members will see some different options when they look at the discussion tool. And you can see some of these tabs here, which will allow us to go into configuration of the discussion tool. And we can see here within this subject a number of discussion forums set up. And I'm going to take this moment just to talk a little bit about structure inside the discussion tool. So we have forums at the top, which is essentially the container that all of the discussion topics will be created inside for that forum. So we have a series of topics potentially. Inside each topic, we will have a number of posts, and I'll talk about posts in two ways. When I talk about a post in a discussion topic, it can either be a thread, which is the start of a number of posts. So here we have threads, and a thread can have a number of replies. But whether or not it's a thread or a reply, they are both types of posts. So effectively what we're saying is forum at the top. Inside the forum, or the folder if you will, you have a series of topics, and inside each of those topics we're going to have a number of posts, whether it's the starting post, which is called the thread, or the replies to that thread, which are also posts. So this view of this subject's discussion boards, we can see the names of the topics down the left-hand side. We can see the number of starting posts or threads, and then we can see the total number of posts. So this tells me effectively that there have been 12 individual new posts created inside Getting Started, but in total the number of threads and replies from students within the subject totals 41. So that's the difference there. So a thread is a type of post, interestingly, and then over on the right hand side we can see the most recent and how that works within this initial view. So there are a number of ways to engage with your discussions. First one is clicking on the name of the topic within the forum, at which point we get the names of the topics at the top, which are a link which will open it in its own page. So if I click on this one, for example, it shows the content of the topic, and then underneath it will show replies where they are organized that way. And I can use my breadcrumbs here at the top to move backwards in that flow, so back to my list of topics if I wanted to. So you can scroll down the page and you can see that when I guess the content within the discussion topic has sort of bled over. So these are individual threads, and I can't see all of it here. It's collapsed, but I can use these chevrons to make them visible. And I can scroll down the page and ultimately get to the ones that I'm looking for. I can also use this sort by option, which will allow me to organize it by sort of most recent, for example, least recent. We can also organize through who the author is, alphabetically or the reverse of that. We can also use some filters to only show us those that have been read, unread, or flagged, for example. It's interesting that it will not count these as, read until you actually open each of the posts. So in this case, there's only the initial thread or post. So this now counts as read. But if there was a thread with replies, so there's a reply here to this thread, if I open that up, there's the original thread. It has a picture attachment. Here is the reply. Now at this point I have seen both, so they now count as read. And if I use that filter as only show unread, I wouldn't be able to see either of those. But if I had not opened this up, it's not going to count them as having been read. So that's one way of engaging with your individual forum topic threads, just by basically clicking through and opening them up to read them in full, or clicking on chevrons to open up hidden content. There is another option. Now, Brightspace is very good at making sure that you can see your text, for example. There's quite a lot of white space. It's so that this is the same view regardless of screen size or the device that you're using, so mobile devices, for example. But if you're interested in looking at a different way of engaging with discussion posts, you may want to hit the drop down next to each topic and viewing the topic in grid view. And the grid view, what we might do is open the second one in grid view, will actually show us within this topic, week 2 discussion on hormones. If we look down here, we can see all of the initial threads and then replies to that thread, and then a reply to the reply. So you can see all of them in this cascading view. So it's a little bit more condensed. It also allows us to see at that point whether there are any attachments to any of these posts, at which point I could open those attachments. I can flag those posts if I wanted to mark them to be able to come back to later, or star them, at which point, which equates to a subscription, which means if there's any change to that post or any replies, I'm going to receive a notification email, which is what the starring does. So you get that kind of top-down view of all of both the starting post or thread and all of the replies through this view without having to scroll all the way down. There can be quite a lot of scrolling in Brightspace, but the grid view does give you, I think, a little bit more control over your content and what you're looking at without having to do all of that scrolling. So you may want to consider engaging with your discussion forum topics through grid view. And you'll see that you also have the ability to use some bulk editing functions like marking them as read or unread from this view. So I could, for example, if I wanted to say, yep, I've looked at everything here, I don't need to be able to see them when I'm filtering by unread, so I can flag these as read at that point, and then I won't have to see them again when I'm filtering. We also have the option here to use a print option with our bulk editing tool, so for one or more. So we'll just do it with one at this point. If we hit print, it'll allow us to see a preview of what's going to be printed. So we'll actually get the post in full. And if there are a number of replies to those original posts, we can get those as well. So I could say I want all of that. Let's print again. And I can see the full thread of the conversation. Original post, replies. And if I wanted to get every discussion post that had happened inside this topic, I could use this select all box and then print, and it's going to give me a number of pages of posts, whether they're the starting post, whether they're replies. All down the page, it will collect all of them, and then you could print those to PDF. So those are some of the bulk functions that we can utilize when we're in the grid view. So what I'm going to do now is actually show you through how to create discussion forums, topics, and create a thread, a starting post. So I might jump into a sandbox. And here we have an empty discussions area, which will allow us now to start creating forums. So there's none in here at the moment. If I go to new and forum, because you need forums before you can create topics inside forums. So I might call this main subject forum, just as an example. And you'll notice that there's a checkbox underneath it here that says, do you want to create a first topic inside this forum with exactly the same name as the forum? I would probably avoid doing this because I think it's going to be confusing for students. The name of the container that all of my topics are going to sit in is main subject forum. I don't need any topics inside that with exactly the same name. That's just confusing. If you want a description visible to students, so the area in which topics generally about this subject will sit. I'm just putting that in for your benefit. And then it asks us how we want this forum to operate, and any topics and threads inside this forum will apply these rules. Do I want anonymous posting for students? No, I'm going to leave that on. I want to see who's making them. Do I want them to have to start a thread inside a topic before they can actually read other people's threads or reply to those? That might be something you want to think about for assessment use, but in this instance, I'm not going to check that. Do you want to have to moderate every post that students make? I'm going to leave that. And do you want this description that we've put up here for the forum to appear at the top of every one of the topics, to be in their description as well? I'm not going to do that at this point. So I can save and close, or I can save and add my first topic. Let's hit save and close and see how this is applied. So here is my first forum. There are no topics in it currently. Whilst I'm doing this process, maybe I'm going to add a couple of forums. So let's add in another forum that I'm going to use for assessment. I won't worry about a description at this point. These will be questions around assessment. And I'll add in a third one for support. And you can build out descriptions for these if you need. But right now I have 3 forums that I will be able to create topics within. Students cannot create forums themselves or topics. They can only create threads inside the topics that you create. All right, so we've made 3 forums. I'm now going to create a topic inside my main subject forum. And there are 2 ways to do this. One of them is to use the chevron beside the forum that you want to create your topic in, and that's probably the easiest way. We can select Add Topic. Call it whatever you like, but for this example, I'm going to say my first topic. And then we have the text describing the topic, remembering that there will be a series of threads inside my topic and potentially replies to those threads. So this is, I guess, I suppose the theme that people will be talking about inside this. And you'll see that it's telling me at the top that this topic is going to be created inside this forum. If I wanted it to be in a different forum, I could change that. But by default, it will happen inside the forum that I opened the new topic option from. If I was going to make this accessible, I would be doing something with this grayed out of area, but by default, all discussion topics are not accessible. And we talk about accessible discussion topics in another video. With your topic, you also have some of our customization options that Brightspace allows us to use for any content, communication, or assessment item. And that includes whether or not we want to set availability dates for when this topic will become visible to students, so we can set start and end dates. Do we want to set release conditions? So we might want to restrict a topic to a particular group of students. We could use release conditions there. We may want to set in post and completion settings. By default, anyone can create a thread or reply to this topic. if I wanted to set some conditions on this topic, such as, again, anonymizing, making them start their own thread before they can read other people's, or moderation, so those same options that we set as our topic conditions, you can also set at an individual topic level. I'm not going to change these. I'm happy with the default. And lastly, evaluation and feedback settings, which largely apply to assessment. So if we were talking about wanting an accessible discussion topic and having a rubric next to it, this is where we would be making some adjustments in here. But again, for my standard discussion topics, I'm not going to use, in fact, any of these settings in this instance. By default, your topics will be visible to students, but if you want them to be hidden, you can change that visibility toggle. So let's hit save and close. And we now have our first topic inside this forum. We also have the option to add topics via this new option up the top, where I can either create additional forums or I can create a new topic from here as well. And if I selected new topic, I would then go through that same process. This time round, I'm going to say new topic on assessment 1, just as an example. But you'll notice here that now I actually have to change which forum this is going to live in, because by default it's going to create a whole new forum to go with this topic, and I don't want to create endless numbers of forums in my forum structure just because I'm doing this. So I'm going to change the forum that this sits within, and instead of creating a whole new forum just for this one post, I'm going to choose existing and situate it within the assessment forum. And then any description, etc. that I had in here, I would put in here, hit save, and it has now added that topic within this forum. So you do need to be quite careful that you have a distinct number of forums that you want to use and that you're not just creating additional forums all the time. I want to sit with having just 3 forums and organize my content in the discussion areas at the topic level. So I'm happy to have a number of topics in here, but I'm not happy just to have a continuous scrolling of forums and topics within them, because I've inadvertently created forums through this process of going new and topic. So just be careful when you are creating either new forums or new topics that it's sitting within your intended structure. Something to think about when you are creating either new discussion forums or topics.